Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Michigan's Haunted Lighthouses by Dianna Higgs Stampfler, narrated by Linda Jones. Notice: the information in this book is true and complete to the best of our knowledge. It is offered without guarantee on the part of the author or the History Press. The author and the History Press disclaim all liability in connection with the use of this book. Preface. I was in the dark about Michigan's historic lighthouses until 1997, when I began working at the West Michigan Tourist Association, WMTA, the oldest continually operating regional tourist association in the country. My first project as the marketing and media director was to research the lights on the official 1,100-mile Lake Michigan Circle Tour, LMCT, route, established in 1987 by Jack Morgan of the Michigan Department of Transportation. I'm not sure how I made it through my life up until that point, having no concept of lighthouses and the fact that Michigan has more than any other state. But that was a turning point for me. The lighthouses, and more importantly, the stories of their keepers, became an immediate and ongoing fascination for me. While at the WMTA, I took the information I had gathered for the Lake Michigan Circle Tour map and guide and created a lighthouse presentation that I could share with groups at senior centers, libraries, museums, civic clubs, and schools. Back in those days, it was a carousel slideshow versus today's PowerPoint presentation. I left WMTA in 2004 to launch my own consulting company called Promote Michigan, offering services in public relations, social media, event planning, and promotion around the state. I'm a freelance writer and broadcaster, and I'm still sharing Michigan's Haunted Lighthouses, previously known as Michigan's Ghostly Beacons, and Ladies of the Lights, on a regular basis. I'm excited that I now also have a book with my name on the cover to serve as a companion to the program. Over the years, I've held memberships in the Historical Society of Michigan and the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association. Both have been instrumental in fueling my continued love of my home state of Michigan, as well as my passion for lighthouses. Since I began working on this book, I've also felt compelled to join many of the other lighthouse and maritime associations around the state, because without these organizations, I wouldn't have had access to much of the information, documents, and images that you find here. 3 individuals stand out for their early inspiration and support of me as a novice lighthouse historian. Dick Mole, who I met back in my WMTA days when he was president of the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association, GLLKA. Dick passed away in late 2015, but I'll always remember him for his dedication to our state's historic lights. Terry Pepper, who currently serves as the GLLKA president and maintains what I consider to be the premier website about Great Lakes lighthouses at terrypepper.com. Whenever I need to verify information or clarify some fact or another, Terry and his website are there. Whenever someone asks me for information, I send them to Terry's site first, because chances are, if he doesn't have it, no one else does either. Fred Stonehouse, a well-known author and historian, whose countless books have provided information, entertainment, and motivation for me in writing this book. I am honored to be able to quote all 3 of these legendary men as solid sources of places, names, and dates for Michigan's many haunted lighthouses throughout this book. This project has been one filled with passion and excitement on a multitude of levels. It's allowed me to revisit many of our lights, gather more ghostly stories, and work with my dad to research the family histories of these keepers. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I did writing it. And thank you to my dear friend and personal editor, Paula, who took time out of her summer vacation to proofread this manuscript. Introduction. Michigan doesn't have an official state structure, but if it did, it would likely be either the 5-mile Mackinac Bridge, opened in 1957 and an aid to navigation itself, or a lighthouse, to represent the 120 or so beacons that stand tall along more than 3,200 miles of Great Lakes freshwater shoreline. Well before Michigan became the 26th state in the Union on January 26, 1837, lighthouses were becoming a recognized part of the landscape, serving as navigational aids for shipping, fishing, lumbering, and mining industries that shaped the state's early history. The first was Fort Gratiot, constructed at the entrance of the St. Clair River and Lake Huron in 1825 by Lucius Lyon, a pioneer surveyor and eventual Deputy Surveyor General of the Michigan Territory. He later represented Michigan in the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. Named after General Charles Gratiot, who engineered the construction of the nearby Fort Gratiot military outpost in 1814, this was one of the few European settlements north of Detroit at the time. The city of St. Joseph was home to the first light station on Lake Michigan, dating back to 1832, although the current range light system wasn't built until 1906 to 1907. That first lighthouse was a single-story dwelling made of stone. In 1859, a new two-story structure was built on a bluff overlooking the city. It remained operational until 1924 and was demolished in 1955. During the early years, St. Joseph also was home to the Lighthouse Depot for Lake Michigan until service was transferred to Milwaukee in 1917. Construction began in 1847 on the Whitefish Point light station on Lake Superior, regarded as the most important beacon on that body of water, as all vessels entering and leaving the lake must pass by. It was near Whitefish Point in 1975 that the Edmund Fitzgerald sank on November 10th during an early-season squall. It is no wonder this treacherous shoreline of Lake Superior is known as the Graveyard of the Great Lakes, as there are more shipwrecks here than any other locale on the lake. On a national level, all lighthouses were administered by the U.S. Treasury's Lighthouse Establishment, which was formed in 1791. After great dissatisfaction with the administration of these lights, responsibility for them was removed from the Treasury Department by an act of Congress in 1853 and transferred to the U.S. Lighthouse Board, which became the second agency of the federal government to take over responsibility for the construction and maintenance of all lights and other navigation aids. Around 1910, it fell to the Lighthouse Service under the Department of Commerce to maintain these maritime structures. The Lighthouse Service merged with the U.S. Coast Guard in 1939. Serving as a lighthouse keeper in the mid to late 1800s and into the early 20th century was a government position often hired by the office of the President of the United States. During the Civil War and in the years that followed, many veterans found work serving as keepers, including Captain James S. Donahue in South Haven and Aaron Sheridan on South Manitou Island. Despite both men being wounded in battle with what many would consider debilitating injuries, Donahue lost a leg and Sheridan lost the use of an arm. These heroic keepers were diligent in their duties of tending to their respective lights and also assisted with life-saving duties as needed. Tending a lighthouse wasn't a job one took lightly. Most of the keepers who accepted the challenging role did so with a great sense of pride and dedication, like Captain William Robinson at White River Light Station in Whitehall. He was instrumental in the construction of the light, and he was named its first official keeper in 1875, a position he held for 44 years before passing away at the light in 1919 at the age of 87. For others, lighthouse keeping was a family business, with duties shared among husbands and wives, children and grandchildren, uncles and nephews, brothers and sisters. This was the case with Julia Toby Braun Way in Saginaw, who served as keeper when her husband Peter became disabled and was unable to tend to the light. She ended up outliving 2 husband keepers and working alongside her son, DeWitt. Many question why so many of Michigan's lighthouses are rumored to be haunted, and questions arise as to who these spirits really are. Nearly 1/5 of all the lights in the state, past and present, have a ghostly story to be told. Maybe it is the tragic deaths that occurred during those early days when ships sank and keepers risked or lost their lives in the line of duty that creates these unsettled souls. such is the case at Big Bay Point Lighthouse northwest of Marquette, where a distraught William Pryor took his own life after his son died from an injury sustained while tending the light. And it can be expected that local lore has something to do with the legends that are passed on from generation to generation, growing like tall tales, something akin to fake news in today's world of digital media. Dick Mole once told me something to the effect that every lighthouse worth a grain of salt has a good ghost story, and if there isn't one, you just make one up. Regardless of the truthfulness of the ghost stories, the histories of the lighthouses and their keepers are well documented in Michigan's past, and thanks to dedicated individuals who have worked tirelessly to preserve them, their future looks bright as well. If you have a ghost story to share, please email travel@promotemichigan.com. Lake Michigan. 1. South Haven Keeper's Dwelling. Nearly 150 years after he first began his service at the lighthouse in South Haven, James Samuel Donahue remains one of the town's most noted historical figures. Maybe that is because he continues to make his presence known to those who work and visit the keeper's residence, where he raised his family and dedicated his life to protecting those who traveled the waters of the Black River and Lake Michigan. Today, the residence is home to more than Donahue's ghost. It is a library and research facility operated by the Michigan Maritime Museum. Staff, researchers, and volunteers have long shared accounts of mysterious goings-on inside the home, from the creaking of floorboards upstairs when no one was there, to opening and closing of doors. However, the ghost is more of a presence than a nuisance. Donahue, like many of the other spirits that linger at Michigan Lights, simply feels more comfortable inside the protective walls of his one-time home. Yet not everyone who has had access to this building over the years has had the pleasure of meeting its resident spirit. I haven't seen any ghosts at the keeper's house. I guess I'm forewarned in any case, Kenneth Pott said in a 2000 article in the Herald Palladium, a St. Joseph, Michigan-based newspaper. Pott served 19 years as curator and archaeologist at the Michigan Maritime Museum, and over the years has been active with the Michigan Museums Association Board, American Association of Museums, Historical Society of Michigan, and Western Michigan University's Frederick S. Upton Fellowship Program in Public History. Born to Irish immigrants Manday and Nellie Lone Donahue on March 18, 1840 in Addison County, Vermont, James Samuel Donahue was one of 7 children. At the age of 12, he took a job on a whaling ship, sailing around the Pacific and Arctic Oceans for nearly 4 years before returning to the New England area. He landed in Detroit shortly thereafter and enlisted in June 1861 as a private in Company A, 8th Michigan Infantry, fighting in the Civil War. Donahue was active in several battles, taking a hit to his shoulder during an engagement on James Island, South Carolina. He was laid up for several weeks but returned to the front line and saw action at Cumberland Gap, Antietam, and Strawberry Plains, Tennessee, among other battles. On May 6, 1864, his left leg was struck by a conical-shaped mini-ball, resulting in an amputation at the thigh. Discharged 4 months later, he returned to Detroit, before moving to Gratiot County in the center of the Lower Peninsula, where he married Sophia Oberlin on June 17, 1872. During this time, the port town of South Haven was taking shape around Michigan's thriving lumber industry. A large sawmill was constructed in 1866 by George Hanna's, followed by a series of stores, hotels, saloons, and churches. Tourists came next, followed by a growing agricultural industry in an area later referred to as the Fruit Belt due to a lake-effect climate that provides the ideal conditions. With an influx of traffic along the area waterways, harbor improvements became increasingly important. As the Army Corps of Engineers worked to increase the width of the channel and extend the piers, the Lighthouse Board requested an appropriation of $6,000 in 1868 for the construction of a pierhead beacon and keeper's dwelling. However, Congress later recalled unexpended funds, putting an immediate halt to the project. Back on track by 1871, A 30-foot-tall wooden light with an octagonal cast-iron lantern was built at the end of the pier. A 75-foot-long wooden catwalk was also erected, allowing the keeper to access the light tower even when waves were crashing over the pier below. Captain W.P. Bryan was the first keeper, activating the light for the first time in 1872. Shortly thereafter, the keeper's residence was constructed on a bluff overlooking the Black River, just a short 1,125-foot walk from the light. Captain Bryan's tenure in South Haven was short-lived, and he was removed from service at the end of the 1873 season. The South Haven Sentinel reported on his departure on November 15, 1873. Captain W.P. Bryan received notice Monday evening from the Secretary of the Treasury that his services as lighthouse keeper at this port were no longer necessary. No successor was named in the letter, neither has the captain an intimation as to who his successor is to be. Justice to humanity demanded that there should be a light on the pier, and the captain has attended to it through the week, notwithstanding his peremptory dismissal without any known cause. The management of the light during the past season has been satisfactory to every sailor, and if the captain was discharged on any report made, we think the Secretary should listen to the appeals of our citizens for reinstatement. We have several times been opposed to the captain in local matters, but we have no hesitation in saying that as director of our Union School and attending to the needs in the nighttime of our Marine friends, he has proven himself the right man in the right place. The following March, 34-year-old one-legged Donahue accepted the position of acting lighthouse keeper, the second of only 6 men to officially tend the light. He and Sophia moved to the shoreline community where, on March 17, 1875, they welcomed their only son, Edward M. Donahue. Sadly, Sophia passed away just 4 months later on July 3rd, at the age of 27. The captain's logbook for that date includes a sad entry. Rain and cloudy, wind moderate, lake smooth, the night dark, the weather warm. My wife died this afternoon at 4 p.m. of lung disease. The following day he wrote, foggy wind, the fog thick all day, the lake smooth, the night dark. I buried my wife today at 4 p.m. The following spring, on April 19, 1876, Donahue married his second wife, Anna Keim. Over time, they expanded their family with 5 sons, Walter L., John Bagley, Calvin C., James M., and Watson B., and a daughter, Catherine A. It must have been cozy quarters inside the home, given that his mother-in-law, Anne Keim, brother-in-law George, and George's wife, Juliet, also lived with them. The 1910 census also listed Thomas Keim as a resident. But with more people comes more help in keeping up the house and tending to the light, especially given Donahue's war injuries. It is known that Donahue walked with the assistance of crutches, and later a peg leg of sorts, neither of which would have made it easy for him to make his way down to the pier or lighthouse, let alone climb the 37.5-foot tower, later extended another 5 or 6 feet in height, still relatively short by lighthouse standards. Having the assistance of family and occasionally friends or others in town would have made his job easier to manage. We have several photographs of him with the crutches, as well as a contemporary painting depicting him with crutches and no wooden leg, according to an email from Emily Stapp, collections and office manager at the Michigan Maritime Museum and Mary Alice Cannoni Great Lakes Research Library in South Haven. But from his journals he mentions applying for an artificial limb. On December 13, 1877, he noted, I received transportation from Major G.B. Dandy to go to New York to procure an artificial limb. And years later, on October 19, 1885, he noted, I was at the station all day and night with the exception of going to the bank and drawing $75 from the government for a leg. The local newspaper, South Haven Messenger, even noted both walking aids in an 1890 article that mentions Donahue has been encumbered with a wooden leg and crutches ever since the war. Up until 1887, there was no life-saving station in South Haven, which meant Donahue was also responsible for monitoring the shoreline as ships traveled in and out of the area for business and pleasure. It is said he is credited with saving 15 lives during his years of service, including a couple of instances where his sons, Calvin and James, found themselves in distress while in the water near the pier. Donahue's efforts never went unnoticed. Residents and city officials regarded him as a local hero. On the evening of his 46th birthday in 1885, he was called upon by 52 seamen who presented him with a gold medal engraved with an image of the South Haven Lighthouse on one side and his name and date on the other. This paired well with the silver medal he received from the federal government, inscribed on one side with "To Captain James S. Donahue for bravely rescuing several persons from drowning in 1875 to 1889. Tending a lighthouse was a tedious and often grueling job for any man or woman. Imagine having to carry a cast-iron pail full of hot whale oil, lard, or, in Donahue's case, kerosene, down the pier or catwalk, depending on the weather conditions, then up the staircase to the lantern room each and every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Now imagine taking on that responsibility while walking with a peg leg or on crutches, as would have been customary for Donahue. Add to that the fact that his keeper's residence was, and still is, a short walk from the tower itself. According to records, conditions warranted that Donahue spend the night inside the tower itself nearly 90 nights during his decades of service. There were even accounts of the determined captain crawling on his hands and knees along the pier with a lit lantern between his teeth to make it to the light during inclement weather. Talk about dedication to the job. During Donahue's tenure, improvements continued at the light station. In 1890, the South Haven Beacon was chosen to test a Welsbach burner gasoline light, which turned out to double the intensity of the light and reduce the consumption of fuel by half. The pier was extended in 1901, and shortly thereafter, a fifth-order Fresnel lens was installed. A new cylindrical metal tower came next, replacing the wooden structure that had suffered 30 years of wear and tear at the hands of Lake Michigan and Mother Nature. The prefabricated steel tower arrived in October 1903 aboard the tender Hyacinth, with Captain E.B. Marquette at the helm. Crews worked to secure it to the pier, install the catwalk and Fresnel lens, and then paint it white, before Captain Donahue proudly ascended the spiral staircase for its inaugural lighting on November 13th. One would think lighthouse tending would take up all the keeper's free time, but that wasn't the case with Donahue. Registered as a Republican, he served 2 terms as president of the village board, and was a member of the Blue Lodge chapter and council of the Masonic fraternity, holding several officer positions. He was also post commander of the M.J. Dickinson Post No. 345 of the Grand Army of the Republic, GAR, and a member of the Enterprise Club. To supplement his government salary, Donahue invested in other businesses. In the mid-1880s, he started Donahue Boat Livery. He was also the first operator of the pump house in the city's waterworks building beginning in 1892. He also dabbled in real estate and is believed to have served at one point as postmaster. In all, Donahue served more than 35 years as this town's lighthouse keeper, handling the day-to-day responsibilities, while also being challenged with the dangerous job of rescue efforts. It was the only light he ever tended. He retired in 1909 and passed away in 1917 at the age of 75. Anna died in 1934 at the age of 80. Donahue and both his wives are buried in Lakeview Cemetery just outside of downtown South Haven. When the lighthouse in South Haven was automated in 1940, the Lighthouse Service transferred responsibility for navigational aids to the U.S. Coast Guard, which still maintains the now red tower, pier, and catwalk. At that time, the keeper's residence was also used as crew quarters for the Coast Guard. Eventually, the home was abandoned and later assumed by the General Services Administration, GSA, an independent agency of the U.S. government established in 1949 to help manage and support the basic functioning of federal agencies. In 1991, The Michigan Maritime Museum leased the keeper's residence from the government as a place to house its archives and other historical documents. A few years later, the government began to sell off excess property such as lighthouses and other related structures, and that nearly happened in South Haven. On August 3, 2000, the home and property were deeded to the city, and it is now on permanent lease by the museum as the Mary Alice Cannoni Great Lakes Research Library, the only institution of its kind in the state to archive and share information on the entire scope of Michigan's maritime history, with a collection of nearly 4,000 books, videotapes, sound recordings, maps, DVDs, nautical charts, periodicals, and even a ghost. Given that he served longer than any other keeper in South Haven, as many years as all 5 other keepers combined, it would make sense that the spirit that walks the floors inside the keeper's residence belongs to Captain Donahue. One might also speculate whether his first wife, Sophia, who died at the Light in 1875 of lung disease, might also reside in the historic home. Emily Stapp says, "None of the current staff have had any experiences with ghost activity at the keeper's house. We definitely understand the fascination of haunts and ghosts. After all, as historians, perhaps we are more in tune with dead people. As a reputable museum, we strive to provide the public with facts and truths regarding the past. The stories and hearsay about Donahue have been going on before any of the current staff members came to the museum. Any mysterious noises are no doubt caused by the wind, the house being high on the bluff, and the creaks and groans are the natural ones that old houses make. But you never can be sure. If Captain Donahue's spirit lingers on in the keeper's house, it is because he continues to watch his light and this harbor with dignity and honor, just as he did in life." During the summer of 2015, I was invited by the Michigan Maritime Museum to share my presentation, Michigan's Ghostly Beacons, on the lawn of the keeper's residence. Arriving with plenty of time before setup, I asked for a personal tour of the home I'd only heard about and seen in pictures. I walked through the kitchen door at the back of the house, through the main floor, and upstairs through the former bedrooms to the archive areas. I quietly called out to Captain Donahue, hoping he would make his presence known. I stood quietly on the creaky wooden floors, waiting for a sound or a feeling that would let me know the keeper was there and welcomed me into his home. Sadly, I was not granted the privilege of such a visit. Back in the kitchen, I asked the volunteers who were there setting up for the program if they had ever experienced anything interesting at the house that might be attributed to Captain Donahue, and I was pleased to hear that they had. There were stories of footsteps and doors opening on their own, of voices and unexplainable cold spots. I think most who have spent any significant time inside the home on Michigan Avenue would agree that even though Captain Donahue passed away in 1917, his presence is still an integral part of their town's history, and there's something comforting in that fact. The South Haven Pier is accessible to the public. Parking is available at the adjacent city beach. The tower is not open to the public. The lighthouse is now painted red with an elevated iron catwalk. The current light shines red and extends for 13 nautical miles. The keeper's residence is owned by the city of South Haven and is on lease to the Michigan Maritime Museum. It is not open to the general public, except with advance reservations. Mary Alice Cannoni Great Lakes Research Library, 91 Michigan Avenue, South Haven, Michigan, 49090. 2. White River Light Station, Whitehall. White River Light Station has stood proudly at the mouth of the White River in Whitehall since its fourth-order Fresnel lens was first lit in the spring of 1876, a year after construction was completed, thanks to the dedication of William Bill Robinson III. Bill and his wife Sarah Cooper Robinson immigrated from England to West Michigan looking for work in the 1860s, with 7 of their eventual 13 children, 2 of whom died in early childhood. More than 150 years later, they remain two of the noted residents of this small town along the shores of Lake Michigan. Karen McDonnell, who lived at the Light from 1983 until 2012 as a modern-day keeper and museum curator, had countless encounters with the ghosts of both Bill and Sarah during her 29 years there. In a story published on April 26, 2007.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?